Donald Trump. His presidency from 2017 to 2021 was a spectacle that left an indelible mark on the world stage, including Africa. Trump's approach to Africa was marked by a lack of clear policy, travel bans and aid cuts, leaving a mix of uncertainty and frustration across the continent. In 2018, Trump's alleged shithole countries comment sparked global outrage, poisoning U.S. Africa relations and reinforcing skepticism about American intentions. Trump's budget proposals aimed at cutting foreign aid reflected a shift away from multilateralism, causing concern among African nations reliant on aid for essential services. Trump's focus on trade over aid, particularly through AGOA, created uncertainty and did little to address structural imbalances in U.S.-Africa trade relations. The absence of a coherent Africa strategy under Trump allowed other global players like China and Russia to expand their influence on the continent. Trump's rhetoric and policies elicited mixed reactions from ordinary Africans, with many feeling marginalized and disrespected. The impact of Trump's policies varied across Africa, with some countries adapting while others faced significant challenges, leading to shifting alliances. As the U.S. retreated, China expanded its influence in Africa through massive infrastructure investments, raising both opportunities and concerns. Trump's presidency eroded trust in U.S.-Africa relations, leaving a legacy of mistrust that the Biden administration must work to overcome. You know, they say the internet never forgets. And nowhere is that truer than on Twitter, the digital playground where Donald Trump, the tweeter-in-chief, reigned supreme. His 140-character pronouncements, often fired off in the wee hours, had a way of reverberating across the globe, leaving a trail of diplomatic headaches and bewildered allies in their wake. But what happens when the tweets stop, when the man himself exits the world stage, or at least the part of the stage reserved for heads of state? Do the echoes fade away? Not quite. In Africa, the ghost of Trumpism still lingers, a specter haunting the halls of power, the airwaves, and the digital sphere. Remember that shithole countries remark? Yeah, that's not something easily forgotten. It's become a shorthand for a particular brand of American arrogance, a reminder of the deeply ingrained prejudices that still color perceptions of the continent. And it's given ammunition to those who argue that the U.S., for all its talk of partnership, still views Africa through a colonial lens. But it's not just about the blatant insults. Trump's America First rhetoric, his disdain for multilateralism, his transactional approach to diplomacy, these too have left their mark. They've fueled a sense of uncertainty, a feeling that the ground beneath U.S.-Africa relations has shifted, that the old rules no longer apply. And in that vacuum, new narratives emerge, new alliances are forged, and the future feels a little less certain. Now let's talk about the economy. Trump, the self-proclaimed master of the deal, promised to revitalize the American economy with his "Make America Great Again" mantra. And while the jury's still out on how successful he was on that front, there's no denying that his brand of economic populism had a certain appeal, even across the Atlantic. See, for some in Africa, particularly those disillusioned with the slow pace of development and the perceived failures of traditional aid models, Trump's message of economic nationalism, of putting your own country first, resonated. They saw in him a potential role model, a leader who wasn't afraid to shake things up, to play hardball on the global stage, to prioritize his own nation's economic interests above all else. But here's the catch. Trump's economic playbook, with its focus on protectionism, bilateral deals, and a disregard for labor and environmental standards, is a risky proposition, especially for developing countries. It's a recipe for short-term gains perhaps, but at the expense of long-term sustainability and equitable growth. The allure of Trumpian economics lies in its simplicity, its promise of quick fixes and easy answers. But the reality, as always, is far more complex. Africa's economic future depends on building resilient, diversified economies that work for all citizens, not just a select few. And that requires a different approach, one that prioritizes sustainable development, good governance, and inclusive growth. Here's a funny thing about absence. Sometimes it's the loudest presence of all. And so it is with Trump in Africa. He may be gone from the White House, banished from Twitter, relegated to the golf course of ex-presidents. But his absence, his silence, speaks volumes. You see, during his tenure, Trump made it abundantly clear that Africa was not a priority. He didn't visit the continent, except for a brief stopover in Egypt. He rarely met with African leaders. And his administration's engagement with the continent was, shall we say, sporadic at best. Now, some might argue that this disengagement was a blessing in disguise. After all, Trump's brand of diplomacy was more akin to a bull in a china shop, leaving a trail of broken treaties and bruised egos in its wake. But here's the thing, indifference can be just as damaging as aggression. Trump's absence sent a clear message that Africa didn't matter, that it wasn't worth his time or attention. And that message, my friends, has consequences. It created a void, a vacuum of leadership that other global players like China and Russia were all too happy to fill. So, while Trump may be gone, his legacy of disengagement continues to shape the geopolitical landscape in Africa, creating opportunities for some, challenges for others, and a whole lot of uncertainty for everyone involved. Section 4. Beyond the Trump Show, a new chapter for U.S. Africa relations. Okay, so we've established that Trump's time in office wasn't exactly a golden age for U.S. Africa relations. But hey, every cloud has a silver lining, right? Perhaps the most positive outcome of the Trump era was that it forced a long overdue reckoning with the power imbalances and outdated assumptions that have plagued the relationship for far too long. The Biden administration came into office promising a reset, a return to multilateralism, a renewed commitment to global engagement. And while it's still early days, there are glimmers of hope. The U.S. is back in the Paris Agreement, it's re-engaged with the African Union, and there's a renewed focus on issues like climate change, democracy, and human rights. But let's be real, folks. Repairing the damage done during the Trump years won't be easy. It'll require more than just words. It'll require action, investment, and a genuine willingness to listen to African voices and partner on equal footing. The future of U.S.-Africa relations depends on moving beyond the transactional, the paternalistic, the extractive. It's about recognizing Africa's agency, its diversity, its potential. It's about building partnerships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and a commitment to a more just and equitable world. It's about writing a new chapter, one where Africa is no longer relegated to the sidelines but takes its rightful place as a global leader. And that, my friends, is a story worth telling. Section 1. USAID under siege, under scrutiny. In the world of development, USAID is a giant, known for life-saving vaccines, schools, and agricultural training. But during the Trump era, USAID faced scrutiny. Trump questioned foreign aid, calling for budget cuts. Critics argue USAID is too bureaucratic, yet it has a track record of success. For many, USAID is a lifeline. Trump's threats sent shockwaves through the community. Now let's talk about the real-world consequences of all this. Policy debates have a human face. Imagine a mother in Malawi, relying on USAID-supported clinics for her children's vaccinations. Now the clinic is short-staffed and running out of medicine. Or a young woman in Kenya attending a USAID-funded school. The school is overcrowded and teachers are overworked. These are just two stories among millions. When aid is disrupted, the most vulnerable suffer the most. Investing in development creates a more stable, prosperous world for everyone. So where do we go from here? The old models are no longer fit for purpose. The world has changed, and the U.S. approach to development assistance needs to change with it. It's not just about more money. We need to rethink the entire system. Empower local communities, listen to their voices. Sustainable development is achieved through partnership. The U.S. must adapt to a changing geopolitical landscape. Reimagine global aid to build partnerships that benefit everyone. So we've journeyed through the Trumpian jungle, hacked our way through the thicket of tweets and trade wars, and emerged, perhaps a little bruised, on the other side. What have we learned? What wisdom can we glean from this wild ride through the savannah of U.S. Africa relations? Well, for starters, we've learned that words matter. That a president's pronouncements, even those delivered with a characteristic Trumpian lack of grace, have the power to sting, to alienate, to undermine years of carefully cultivated diplomacy. The shithole country's comment, however much the White House tried to spin it, left an indelible mark, a stain on America's reputation that won't easily be washed away. We've also learned that the America First philosophy, when applied to foreign policy, is a recipe for isolation, for distrust, for a world where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Trump's transactional approach, his disdain for multilateralism, his willingness to throw allies under the bus in pursuit of narrow self-interest, these are not the ingredients of a stable, prosperous, or just world order. And let's not forget about USAID, that once mighty engine of American soft power, now sputtering under the weight of budget cuts and ideological battles. The Trump administration's assault on foreign aid, its attempt to gut an agency that has done so much good in the world, was not just short-sighted, it was cruel. It was a betrayal of American values, a repudiation of the very idea that we have a moral obligation to help those less fortunate than ourselves. But hey, this isn't the time for despair. It's the time for action. The time to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and start writing a new script for U.S. Africa relations, one that recognizes our shared humanity, our interconnected destinies. The Biden administration has its work cut out for it. Rebuilding trust won't be easy. Repairing the damage done to USAID and other development agencies will take time and resources, and navigating the complexities of a world where China is no longer content to play second fiddle will require a deft hand and a clear vision. But here's the thing. America is at its best when it leads with its values, when it embraces its role as a global citizen, when it works in partnership with others to solve the world's most pressing challenges. And nowhere is this more true than in Africa, a continent brimming with potential, a continent on the cusp of a great transformation. So let's ditch the zero-sum games, the US versus them mentality. Let's invest in education, in healthcare, in sustainable development. Let's support African entrepreneurs, African innovators, African artists. Let's listen to African voices, learn from African experiences, and work together to build a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. The story of U.S.-Africa relations is far from over. The Trump chapter, though tumultuous, was just that, a chapter. Now it's time to turn the page, to start anew, to write a story of hope, of partnership, of shared progress. The pen, as they say, is in our hands.